Welcome to Hey Chaplain. My name is Jared Altick, and I'm a chaplain with the police department. Hey Chaplain is the officer wellness podcast, which brings you expertise and wisdom from police officers around the world. From the LAPD to Scotland Yard, the guests on Hey Chaplain are sharing their wisdom and experience so that you can be prepared for anything. In the span of just over 2 years, the law enforcement community of Kansas City, Kansas, had 4 officers murdered in 3 separate events. 2 were from the police department, and 2 were from the Wyandotte County Sheriff's Office. Captain Stephen Smith, a returning guest and friend of the show, had a connection to all 4 and was actually on scene when the 2 deputies were killed. We're going to hear him recount that day, and then we'll hear from Steve's adult daughter, Taylor Hubbard, to get her perspective on what a cop's kid experiences during those frightening times when the community knows that an officer is down, but the family doesn't yet know who has been hurt. Here's Captain Stephen Smith and, later, his daughter, Taylor Hubbard.
The suspect was facing some very, very serious charges in Missouri, and serious charges in Kansas too, but he was possibly looking at a death penalty case in Missouri. Now, Missouri is not shy about handing out the death penalty. I mean, they have special facilities for it, and they'll execute people down there. So he was looking at some very serious charges in Missouri, whereas Kansas hasn't executed anybody for,
60 years.
Yeah, my lifetime.
Yeah.
So he knew he was facing serious charges in Missouri, and the consensus is, or the belief is at this time, that he was wanting to plan something to either escape in Kansas or do something that would get him sent, for a longer term in Kansas to avoid the death penalty in Missouri. So going back on the investigation, I wasn't involved directly with the investigation, but there is footage of him in the elevator, and he's belly chained, which is the chain goes all across your belly and you're cuffed to it, so your hands are in the front. So there's some limited mobility, but still does a pretty good job of keeping him secured. And I think his feet were chained as well. Okay. So he's not going to be able to run very well. He's really not going to be able to move around enough, but unfortunately it was enough. But he, in the elevator, was looking at the officers' guns. There was kind of the normal banter, talking back and forth. And especially with the sheriff's deputies, they're around prisoners a lot.
They do this every day.
Yeah, they try to build a certain rapport, because a lot of times that rapport, can save you. In this instance, they're talking back and forth, and he had a plan. He wanted to either escape, or he was going to, and probably kill the deputies in the meantime. And if he did, there's a probably pretty good chance, you're going to be facing a very severe term in Kansas, and ultimately saving his life. Yeah, they walked him out to that fenced-in area, which is actually outside the building. And at that point, he took Pat's gun and engaged in a gunfight there. He shot both officers. Teresa was able to return fire and actually hit him several times. And he was a big guy, so pretty easy target and couldn't move very much. But engaged him, but he also shot her, so she was mortally wounded as well. He went to the gate and tried to get it open, but the way the process was they didn't unlock the gate until they had the prisoner inside the van. So
he's still locked in the enclosure.
He's still locked in, and unfortunately we were locked out. So he tried to manipulate the lock, tried to shoot the lock off, and could not do that, and eventually kind of succumbed to his wounds, went back towards the middle and just laid down and waited for help to arrive. And that's what kind of limited us a little bit, is because we didn't have the key, we couldn't get in. And I think they were having issues inside the jail, and that's somebody else's story to tell, but there were some issues inside the jail where they couldn't get directly to him either. There was several minutes before we were actually able to get to them. And
there's people outside the enclosure witnessing this, including some of his family.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And then fire and police and sheriff's office are responding within minutes, including you.
Yes. Well, I was a detective at the time. I was working in my cubicle. It was just before lunch when dispatch got on the air and advised that there were officers down, officers shot behind the sheriff's department. So I jumped up from my desk. just ran out the door because it was going to be closer or easier for me to run there than it was for me to run to my car just a couple of blocks away. So ran down the street. I could hear the sirens. There was another detective with me. I could hear the sirens. I'm running down 7th Street, so I shot down the side street there right by just north of the courthouse. And there's an alleyway that goes back there behind the courthouse, which is where they do the prisoner transports. They load up the prisoners. They let them off, that sort of thing. And there was a fenced-in area back there. That's where they do the unloading. Intensely loud scene. I could hear the sirens first. Some of the officers had shown up but didn't bother to turn their sirens off because they were busy. There was a rather large female there screaming. Officers were holding her back. I later found out that she was the suspect's wife. She had hung out back there after court, which sometimes the family would do just so they get a last wave at their family members or yell something. There were people screaming, yelling at the officers from like the 2nd floor of the courthouse, people that had watched what had happened. Inside the fenced-in area, I saw a rather large individual that was in prisoner clothes that was kind of writhing around on the ground. A lot of blood. There was a gun by him, and there was a female officer that was laying down on the scene as well. Her gun was out. I didn't know who she was at the time, but the focus at that point, you had a lot of officers there, both plainclothes, both uniformed, of all sorts and varieties. They're trying to get into the fenced-in area. At that point, nobody had got inside.
They can't break into the enclosure.
No, they were trying. I saw one former detective of ours, he's retired since, was actually physically pulling on the chain, just trying to rip it apart, and that wasn't happening. We were looking for bolt cutters and stuff like that. There's people screaming, and there was a moment there when I'm watching this to where I felt completely helpless. I think even put my gun away because I couldn't do anything at that point. I didn't have my vest on. I mean, I'm just standing there, and I'm watching this chaos. People are screaming. People are trying to get to these people. The lady's screaming. The sirens are going off. Just absolutely chaotic. So eventually, what was able to happen is one of the sheriff's department commanders there just basically grabbed the fence from the bottom and pulled it up enough for one of our officers, a very brave one, to crawl underneath and get to the suspects, get to the suspect, get him secured.
You saw one of the deputies. When did you see the second deputy? Or did somebody tell you that there were 2 deputies in there?
I knew
inside the enclosure.
I knew there was. I knew there was another one there. I don't remember how. I think, but I could certainly see some activity on the other side of the van. He was actually it's like he tried to escape and kind of got pinned between the fence on the other side of the pinned-in area, between him and the van. Very graphic scene. They were eventually able to get him out using the same method. They pulled him, out from under, and were carrying him around. Fire department personnel were there. They advised him to go ahead and put him on the ground, and one of the firefighters couldn't get to his wounds because he had his vest on. So I was able to assist with that to get the vest off, get it enough so they could start treating him. And then I ended up helping when they got Teresa out of that area as well, got her loaded up on a gurney. I was able to assist with that and get her loaded up in the ambulance, but pretty grave injuries by that time. By this time, more people are showing up, the homicide detectives, more of the sheriff's personnel. I was tasked with walking one of the deputies back to the detective bureau because they were kind of need to get statements. So did that, walked Mike back to the police department to be interviewed. I was interviewed as well. And then as soon as I was done with my interview, I went back to my desk and finished my tasks for the day.
Were you dressed up? You wearing like polo and
No, it was polo and slacks. I keep my vest. At the time, I kept my vest in my car, which was in the parking garage. Right. So it was quite a ways away. So yeah, I was fairly naked, running into that thing, which I didn't care at the time, but it just kind of hit me at a certain point where I just couldn't do anything. Even just standing there pointing a gun at somebody, who didn't really present a threat at that time, but it was a pretty helpless feeling. I mean, I snapped out of it in probably a minute or two. I mean, I became useful again once, things needed to be done. And then essentially just went back to work.
I just graduated college. I was working in theater, actually. And we have these tech rehearsals that are called 10 out of 12, where we work a 12-hour day. And 10 of those are working, 2 of them are on a dinner break. So I think I was actually on dinner break that day, and I got a text from my dad that said, something's going down. I was there, but I'm not hurt and I'm not involved. I'll talk later. That was kind of like a normal, I don't want to say normal, but if things ever happened, that would be his usual check-in. Like, hey, something happened. I'm okay. I'll talk to you later. And that was our sign that everything was okay.
Sure. That's him checking in.
Yeah. But the inclusion of I was there bothered me a little bit because I have no context. Because normally it's something happened to someone else and I know about it, you know about it, kind of thing. And so that was different. So I was like, that's kind of interesting. So I think I went to Twitter to see what was going on. Because at the time, the police department had a very active Twitter. That we could kind of check things. Yeah. And so I saw something happened at the courthouse and I knew he was at headquarters. So I let my stage manager know, which she was a military brat. Her dad was military active duty for a long time. So I let her know. She knew my dad was a cop, so she was very understanding. And so I told her, I said, I need 20 extra minutes of dinner break before I come back, just to make sure everything's okay. So I got the confirmation he was okay, and then just kind of kept checking my phone periodically to see what happened. And then I don't remember how I got the information that he had to go and assist with them. But it was a long day. And then I had another 10 out of 12 the next day. So I didn't get a whole lot of time to check on him or process it. But yeah. That was it. It was just I'm okay. Something happened. I was there, but I'm not hurt.
So 2 years previous to this, the police department here in Kansas City, Kansas, they had 2 officers murdered in separate events in the same summer.
The first one was Detective Lancaster. That is the first time that something happened to someone else in the line of duty, while my dad was working. And it really rattled me and my brother, I remember, because it was a detective and our dad was a detective. You kind of you have this false sense of security when your parent goes up through the ranks. As a patrolman, they're on the streets and they're a little bit more in danger. And then as a detective, they kind of get behind a desk and they're just talking to people and, doing paperwork.
At least the appearance of safety.
Exactly.
Right?
You get this false sense of security. Same thing if your dad or parent goes the sergeant route or the captain route. They kind of get
administration.
They're pencil pushers at that point, right? They get further away from the action. And especially with him graduating the academy with Lancaster really, really, really shook us.
When Lancaster was murdered, your dad wasn't working.
Correct. Yeah. I don't.
It was a day off or something.
Yeah, I think it was his day off. I think I was living with my mom at the time. I know he wasn't working. I just checked on him to make sure, hey, are you okay? Yeah. And then especially when we found out who it was, because I knew they were pretty close in the academy and did a lot together. They were similar career paths wise. So, yeah, he wasn't working that day, but was aware of it. And when something like that happens, we always know there's a possibility he might have to suit up and go in and go help and stuff.
But then, just a short while later, just a few months later. There was another murder.
Yes. I remember that day specifically. I was at my mom's house. I was at home. I think I was doing homework. I was in college at that point. And Twitter again, I opened Twitter and it said there was an officer down. And I think it even said there was a captain down. But the internet, things can get confused. And I know
oh yeah,
you're getting information from multiple different channels,
The initial reports may not be accurate.
Exactly. And so I know there's an officer down somewhere. So I send him a text and check in and say, hey, I saw this. You doing okay? And he doesn't answer, which isn't like him, So then I give him a call, and it goes to, I think I called him a few times. I think I left one message, but I think I called him a few times. And it was probably an hour before I could get a hold of him.
What did you do in the meantime?
I called my best friend's dad was a sergeant at the time. So called her and said, hey, I read this on Twitter. There's an officer down. Where is your dad? First off, we have this like code word we would use with each other, like buddy check, something happened. Where's your dad?
Did they have any information, or did they learn this from you?
They learned that from me. So she called her dad, who answered instantly. He was a sergeant at the time. He answered, said he was okay, but he didn't have any information on who it was. He kind of the same thing. He knew something had happened, but he didn't know what was going on yet. I spoke to another friend whose dad was on the bomb squad at the time, I think. I said, buddy check, something happened. Where's your dad? Do you know where my dad is? And that was my other question was, okay, well, does anybody know where my dad is? They said the same thing. They were like, my dad's not working today. He said the same thing. He knows something's going on, but he doesn't know information.
How does that hit you? You've checked with two people. They both know where their dads are.
It's awful because I'm usually the other one on, I'm usually on that end of it. I know where my dad is because he sits behind a desk at headquarters. So, and like we talk almost every day, or at least have some sort of communication. And so for him, not like, if I call him, even at my old age now, if I call him, he answers on like the second ring and he's like, hello, like what's wrong? What's wrong kind of thing. And so it's very rare that I can't get a hold of him. I even called my mom. My parents were divorced at the time, but like I even called my mom and was like, have you spoken to dad? Do you know where he is? Like I can't get a hold of him. So she called her people that she still knows or other cops' wives in the department trying to get a hold. And eventually he called me back and he was like, I'm sorry, I was in an interrogation, but it was a good hour that I couldn't track him down.
So he calls you on your cell phone?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What's it like seeing his number?
It is better than someone else calling you. That's kind of always the, as a cop kid, it's better if your dad contacts you or like he shows up to the door than like another police officer contacting you. Yeah. Little off topic, but I remember one time he had an incident where he got some bodily fluids on him on his job and he had to come home and change in the middle of the day. Yeah. But because it was him walking in the door and not another police officer walking up to the door.
That hits you different.
Yeah. You're like, okay, something happened, but you're good. He changed his clothes and went back out. So it was good that he was calling me because I knew just from being a cop kid that like if another officer is contacting you, that's a problem. Yeah. That's not good.
In the moments before he called, where were you tracking?
I am normally a very like calm person in general. Like especially under pressure, I work very well under pressure. I work very well. And like, I'm usually very calm. And I think because of Lancaster just passing, and then we've got this, and also at the same time that this was happening, I remember there were officers ambushed in Dallas, that had just happened. There was a lot of like police violence happening. And so that really was like making me anxious and bothering me. And again, I can always get a hold of him. And so the fact that I couldn't and didn't have any clue of where he was and that sense of security that him being in headquarters meant he was okay was gone now. Yeah. It was more nerve-wracking than it usually is. I've never been in that situation since then or before then because I'd never really worried. I mean, you worry, but you'd never really worried about that and not being able to get a hold of him, know who it is. And it was like hard because I was an adult doing this, trying to, figure out where he was and what he was doing. And it's harder when you become an adult because you have to think of it through like an adult lens when you're still like a cop's kid. Like I still call myself a cop's kid. You hold
yourself to a high standard.
Yeah,
Those murders happened when you were college age.
Yeah, I think I was like 19, 20.
Yeah. That second murder was Captain Melton.
Mm-hmm. That one was really hard because if I remember correctly too, Melton was one of the people who helped organize Lancaster's funeral
Yeah.
and was one of the people that said, we don't have a good process for this. So it had been a long time since they had done that, and that Melton was the one that kind of had stepped up and made those like funeral procedures.
He put together a binder.
Yeah, a binder.
Yeah.
And then that had to get used on him. And that was, I think that bothered him a lot.
Bothered your dad.
Yes, yeah. And the fact that both Lancaster and Melton like weren't even supposed to be there. They just like rolled up on the scenes to help, and knowing that he was in that position as a detective, someone again who's not on patrol, who's not actively going out and
not in the front line.
Yeah, not a first responder, like a second responder or a third,
second responder for firefighters.
Someone who shows up when the scene's clear and like they're just talking to people and making sure everything's okay. And so I think that really affected him as well.
Yeah. Okay. Do you feel like, from your perspective, was your dad back to normal after those two murders? Was he before Rohrer and King? Was he affected to some degree? Was he back to normal? Where do you think he was at?
I think he was still affected because just in the broad scope of things, just like within the police community and with our country, there was a lot of police violence. And I remember my mom even telling me and my brother, like, people know your dad. Like, people know he's a cop. If things go down, run the opposite direction. Don't, split off from him. Go somewhere else. Like, I remember growing up hearing that.
That he could be a target.
Yeah. Just because of his job. Both of the towns that he worked in, Kansas City and Liberty, were small towns. So people knew him and people knew what he did. And so I know the police culture was really in kind of a negative space between that 2016, 2018 time frame. And so I know it worried him a little bit more, especially kind of like I said, like knowing that he was behind a desk, but so was Lancaster. And like, I know that it kind of bothered him because I remember me and Ian saying, like, please do not leave headquarters without your vest on, which I didn't know he didn't have his vest on.
Well, I want to get to that. You said that it stuck out to you that he had called you and indicated that he was there. Mm-hmm. He was at the scene. Okay. Yeah. When did you get more information?
I think it was when I went over to his house. So like I said, I worked that Friday, Saturday. I think I went over to his house on Sunday because that was my day off, that I got more information. I think he may have said like I had to help the officers who were down or something. But when I sat down, he actually told me the whole story in person, and that he had to, what always stuck out to me was that he had to take the vest off of the officers because the fire department just couldn't do it. And so he had to reach in and take it out. And that while he was doing that, he knew they were already dead or dying. Like, that's always what stuck out to me the most.
Had he, growing up, had he told you grisly police stories, or were you sheltered from that? Or was it somewhere in between?
The stories we would get was we would sit at the dinner table. We'd say, did you catch any bad guys today? And we would get what some people consider grisly. I married a man who did not have any involvement with law enforcement. So sometimes me and my dad will talk at dinners with him, and he is just floored at the things that we casually eat spaghetti over. Horrified at some of the things we eat, like tacos and nachos over. And he's hearing like these most horrific things that he's ever heard. But we,
so you were acclimated to some of this.
Yeah, to some of it. We grew up watching Cops or Law and Order SVU and stuff like that. But as I got older, I found out there were things that he went through that he did that he wouldn't tell us. We got the fun grizzly, if you can call it that,
I know what you mean. Yes.
Like he'd tell us the fun grizzly stories or the funny things he'd come up on, or the
ones that are slightly less tragic.
Yes. Yeah. Not the ones you tell your children.
But this was him taking off the vest of a fellow officer.
Yes.
That's mortally wounded.
Yes. Mm-hmm. The really first time it was like this is what I went through and it's messing me up kind of conversation.
Listening to you tell the story as a chaplain, I'm thinking, actually that sounds good that he is, just a few days later, he's communicating to his adult kids and telling a story, and you've been acclimated to that. He's not going to necessarily traumatize you, but he's able to communicate. That sounds really good. Mm-hmm. But you saw signs that things weren't going so good. What do you think you saw in him, or what did you sense in him?
I actually had people reach out to me. So I had members of our family reach out to me and say, Taylor, you need to go talk to your dad. You're an adult now. Your relationship with your parent changes once you become an adult. Yeah. And we've always had a close relationship. I've always been kind of the family liaison when it comes, oldest daughter. I'm my dad's carbon copy. And they knew that if he was going to talk to anybody, he would talk to me. And so I think my brother actually went over separate. I don't think we were over at the same time. I don't remember that. Maybe we were. But I had a couple people reach out to me within the family and say, you need to go talk to your dad and you need to tell him he needs to go talk to someone. So when I went over and he told me the story, I remember saying, you have to go see someone about this. You can't.
So you were hearing that feedback right away? In the first couple of days you were hearing that?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
I know my mom and my grandma specifically had reached out to me to see if he had spoken to me any further about it because...
But you'd been working.
But I'd been working, yes.
Right.
So I was like, I haven't had time to really talk. I think I checked in on him a couple of days the next day because I knew he was going into his Friday, so he had the day off.
Right.
So that's a lot of time to just sit and think and process.
So other people are picking up signs before you've even really had a chance to have a meaningful interaction with them.
I kind of knew that something like this was something that he had never really experienced before.
Yeah.
And I knew that that's something that really needed to, I'm big on mental health. I'm big on, talking through your things. And I understand how traumatic this kind of a job can be. And so I knew that something like this is not a normal thing for anybody to have to go through, let alone a law enforcement officer.
Lancaster murder, he was off that day. The Melton murder, he was in the office and stuck at the office.
Go anywhere. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Right. And then this one, he is there and actively watching two coworkers die in front of him. Yeah. And, I know just that kind of thing builds and builds and builds and builds. And I knew, regardless of how, even though I hadn't talked to him, I knew he needed to talk to someone.
Were you the right person to communicate that to him?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so because I think I'm one of the people he listens to. Yeah.
Could you alone have convinced him? Did you need other people to communicate that to him too?
I don't think I would have. I think he would have done it for me. I think he would have gone and talked to someone because I asked him to. I think having other people, especially in the police department, notice it too helped.
Yeah. He had a coworker's spouse and others that just drip, drip, drip. Yeah. Multiple people saying, hey, you should go talk to someone.
And cops, they don't talk about their feelings. No. They don't talk about, they know it's a traumatic job. They know it's a hard job. They just, you suck it up, you do the job. That's what you're supposed to do. Yeah.
And he was veteran. I mean, he had done years at one department, come over to this department, done years here. I mean, he'd seen a lot of stuff.
Yeah. He'd seen a lot of stuff. He'd seen a lot, even in Liberty. I remember there was a big school bus accident. He wasn't working, but a lot of his coworkers were. The big tornadoes that went through. I remember he was off those days, but he had to suit up and go in because he had to, and saw a lot of damage there. And so I knew he had seen a lot.
Yeah, and been around a lot.
And been around a lot because he's been doing it for so long.
Yeah. How long approximately was it between the event and when he finally did go talk to someone?
When I told him, you need to talk to someone, he said, I already have an appointment set up. So he said, I know, I do. He said, I already have an appointment set up. I've already started that process because I thought I was going to have to do a lot of convincing.
How confident were you that he was going to keep that appointment?
I was not.
I've had a lot of cops that literally drive to the office, never get out of their car, drive back home.
I think I even like checked in like that day to make sure he went to the appointment and like actually participated, didn't just go and like say, sign off that I went to the appointment and go back. Like, I think I actually was like, did you actually go? But I thought I was going to have to go over, because I think I was with my husband at the time. I don't think we were married yet, but I was like, hey, I'm going to go by myself, because I was ready to do battle with him and like make him go to this therapy appointment. Like, you have to talk to someone. You have to go, even if it's not a full-blown appointment. Like, you have to do something and talk to someone about it.
Tell me your argument. Now, you were able to get traction with your dad, but some people have begged their police officer relative, their mom, dad, brother, whoever, they begged them to go get help and they won't do it. What's the argument? How do you convince them? Is it just finding the right person to say it, or is there a case to make?
I think it's the right person. It's the right tone. It's got to be their decision to do it. I think that's you can't force someone to get help that doesn't want help. And like I said, they're used to burying it because they see a lot. They see a lot, they do a lot, and they're used to burying it. And I think because we'd always had an open dialogue of what he saw at work, that I knew that this was so out of the ordinary. And I knew that he struggled with PTSD. I knew that, he had nightmares and that he had some anxiety, especially after Lancaster, after Melton. And then now that it needed to be done. And so I think I really didn't have to convince him much because he had already heard it from but I was going to go in and, say, this is going to mess you up. Like, you're going to have to retire early. I know he had a couple friends that saw some things in Liberty that they had to retire early because they just couldn't get over the things that they had seen and the things that, they had to help with. And so, like, I knew this would be an incident that would end his career early if he didn't. How
important is it to your dad that he stay on the full time he wants to stay on?
It's very important. We have this conversation a lot of what are you going to do instead? Because I remember asking after Lancaster and Melton, like, how much longer do you have? Like, can you get out? And it was always, I don't know, maybe, but what else would I do? What else do I do?
Who he is.
Yeah, it is, because it's what he's always done. So he's like, I don't know what else I do. So I'm just going to keep riding it out, keep doing it. And so we still have this conversation a lot of like, how much longer do you have? Are you almost done? Can you get out soon? And yeah, maybe. But, it was important to him. And I know he had some buddies who got out before they were ready because they couldn't do it anymore. It just affected them so badly.
Now, your dad says that after a few sessions, it really made a big impact on him and really helped him. Do you think that's accurate?
I think it is, because I think having the experience and having him being a veteran, he knew how to process a lot of things, and he knew how to live with, the job and what he was doing. And I think this, it happens in mental health too. You have people when they have like long-term conditions like anxiety, depression and stuff, sometimes you just hit a point where you just can't get past. It's a roadblock. And so you need to go to therapy or you need to go get medication to kind of help you get over that. And then once you learn those new coping skills, you can kind of, adapt and apply them to your life, and it helps. I definitely think he just needed a new perspective or a new way to look at that. And I know he had like an open dialogue with his therapist or whoever the mental health professional at the police department is.
Clinician was.
Yeah, that if he had issues, he could go back and talk through them and have an email conversation or something like that. And that door was always open. And I think that helped as well. But yeah, I cops don't like to linger on things, especially emotions. Sure. The fact that there were even two sessions was great,
Now, from the daughter's perspective, how's he been the last 7 years?
Better. I mean, it's definitely, I think it was hard for the first year or two after that.
How closely were you watching him?
Pretty closely. Especially with the way that the culture was going. And I know things have
right after that, we get into like the George Floyd
we
period,
get into 2020 and
COVID and everything else.
Yeah, all that. He definitely got a little further off the streets, which was nice. I think he took it safer about things, was a little less risk taking than he probably was in his younger days, because he's getting older and now he has grandkids and he's almost to retirement, and so it's definitely gotten better, and he's become more open to getting help if he needs it.
Have there been any scares in the last 7 years? Has it been pretty quiet?
I think it's been pretty quiet. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. He went to property crimes for a long time, which was honestly the ideal place for him to be, for my own sanity, because he was definitely mostly behind a desk, or missing persons was part of that too. So it was a lot of, Facebook research and internet research and stuff like that. Him going back on the road is a little more, I know that's harder on both of us, because he's seeing things again that he hasn't seen in a really long time. And just knowing that he's back out on the road, but seeing retirement at the end of the tunnel is a little easier.
He's in the position that Captain Melton's in.
Yeah. And
so,
that's a little bit harder, but also knowing because of all the things that he's seen, he might be a little bit smarter and maybe will actually wear his vest when he's supposed to be.
Yeah. I think he does a pretty good job out patrol.
Yes,
wearing his vest, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. What advice do you have to someone else who's the daughter of a cop out there somewhere?
Keep an open dialogue. Try to keep that dialogue open, but also understand that, you can't make them talk. You can't make them get help if they don't want it. They have a job to do. It is a dangerous job, but at the end of the day, it's a job. And if you look at it with a clear mind and a level head statistically, the chances of something going wrong or being bad are very low. We just here in Kansas City had very unfortunate circumstances. You got to think of it from a practical point of view. And I think having a police officer father helps me with my practicality and my level-headedness, because that's what he looks at. He looks at numbers, he looks at statistics, he looks at probabilities, and just knowing that this was an anomaly kind of helps kind of put that into perspective.
It's not fate that this kind of trauma will visit your family.
Mm-hmm.
It might, but it probably won't.
Yeah, it's not a death sentence. I know far more officers who have retired and moved to the hills to
or Florida
or Florida or one of his became a tattoo artist. I know far more officers that retire and write books, go be security somewhere, raise their grandkids than I do that have died in the line of duty. So it's not a job that has a death sentence. It's just a job that's dangerous. I mean, I kind of think of it like oil riggers or, pilots or, things you can die on your car drive to work. Things happen every day. It certainly happens.
Doesn't serve you to obsess over it.
Absolutely. No. Yeah. Because if you do that, it'll not only be unhealthy for you, but unhealthy for your family. If you obsess over it and if you become so doomsday about it and upset about it, it's gonna ruin your marriage. It's gonna ruin your family. You have to look at it through a practical lens, which I get can be hard.
So you've already got a child.
Yes.
That's Steve's first grandchild.
Uh-huh.
You've got more on the way.
Yeah, I've got two boys on the way. Yeah,
that's
twins.
Awesome. That's awesome. All right.
Yeah.
So you have a little girl.
Yes.
And you've got twin boys on the way. What do you see your dad doing in the future? Retirement will eventually come. Mm-hmm. What do you think he'll be doing besides playing with the grandkids? He's always loved writing. So I've always wanted for him to pick that back up. And he's been writing books off and on my whole life, different books too, not even the same one. Just I'd come into him writing on the computer. What are you writing? Oh, I don't know. Just, so I think he could release a book of his stories in law enforcement, because he has some tragic ones, but he has some really funny ones too. Yeah.
Just crazy things that happen to him. He could be a podcaster. I mean, he could do this. He seems to enjoy, talking to you and doing this. He could do this and do a police podcast. I've always told him he could go be an adjunct professor. he has enough commensurate experience for any type of law enforcement class, you know, or anything like that. Go teach at the academy. He's always loved doing that.
With the grandkids here, I don't see him moving to Spain.
No.
Writing his book there. So,
right, yeah. Staying here, I mean, lots of museum visits, lots of exploring and stuff like that, taking the grandkids to the museums and stuff like that, showing his medieval weapons cache and all that stuff. Yeah.
That's awesome. Taylor, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I want to thank Taylor and her dad, Steve, for coming in today. In fact, while I was interviewing Taylor, her dad was sitting right here, so I don't want you to think that we were talking about him behind his back. And I very much appreciate their willingness to be vulnerable and to talk about what they each experienced on that day, and to do that with so much openness and transparency. I know that the reason they were willing to do this is because it was going to help other police officers and their families. My hope for this episode is that an officer would send this to their family, or a family member would send this to their officer. And by listening, by hearing this other story, your own story would become something that your family could talk about. On the next episode of Hey Chaplain.
Well, I just start out with a series of questions. You know, when I'm talking to a group of officers, I can look at them all and say, how many of you remember when you first began this job, you would have done it for free? And they smile, you know, they all smile. And I said, you know, here you are, you had done the job for free, you're having more fun, should be legal. I said, you fast forward 15.8 years later, last year, the cop that committed suicide had so many years on he had. I said, do you have the same clientele from the beginning you had to the end? Do you have the same mad, sad, and bad people? The same domestics, all that stuff? Sure you do. Do you have the same less than perfect leadership? Sure you do. Well, how, with one set of circumstances, can I enjoy this job and have so much fun, and 15.8 years later, I'm ready to eat a gun with the same circumstances? What is that?
The views expressed here are the personal views of the host and our guest, and do not necessarily represent the views of any law enforcement agency or its components. If you like this episode, please share it with a cop or someone who loves a cop. Thank you for listening to Hey Chaplain, and as always, pray for peace in our city.